The room was buzzing as the hearing resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to a heavy, grim realization. Congresswoman Waters returned to her seat, flanked by a phalanx of staffers who whispered frantic strategy adjustments into her ear. She tried to straighten her designer jacket and reclaim the mask of authority, but her hands betrayed her, shaking just enough for the front row to notice. Across from her sat Dan Bongino, as patient as a hunter, waiting for the room to settle before opening the second manila folder. He looked directly into her eyes and asked if she was ready to talk about the spirit of public service. We all know the phrase pay to play, and we know how much you claim to loathe it when you are grilling bank CEOs on national television. You have spent decades lecturing this country about the ethics of campaign finance and the evils of politicians enriching themselves. So, it should be easy for us to agree that using campaign donations to pad the bank accounts of family members is a betrayal of the voters. Waters gave a slow, suspicious nod, likely wondering which specific document Bongino was about to pull from his stack. He did not keep her waiting long, pulling out a thick set of Federal Election Commission filings that told a story of a very lucrative family enterprise. Let us talk about your daughter, Karen Waters, and her company, Progressive Connections. For over 20 years, your campaign has used her services for something called slate mailers, a practice you claim is totally legitimate. Now, for those watching at home who do not live in the world of political consulting, these are basically pamphlets that list endorsed candidates. It is marketing, plain and simple, and while it might be legal, the sheer scale of the money flowing to your daughter is what should shock the conscience of every taxpayer. Since 2003, your campaign has funneled over $1.3 million to Karen Waters and her firm. The gallery erupted in gasps as that number $1.3 million echoed off the high stone ceilings. Someone in the back shouted in disbelief, and even the jaded reporters in the press section stopped their tweeting to look up. Waters leaned into her microphone, her voice rising in a sharp defense, claiming her daughter provides professional services. Bongino did not blink. Instead, he began reading the payments cycle by cycle, year by year, letting the numbers land like hammer blows. It started small, with $42,000 here and $68,000 there. But as the years went on, the family business grew exponentially. By the 2022 election cycle, while the families in your district were struggling with record inflation, your daughter was pocketing $192,000 from your campaign. That is more than what most teachers or police officers in your district earn in 4 years of hard labor. And here's the kicker. You are the only federal politician in the entire state of California who uses this specific slate mailer loophole to this extent. It is not a common practice for members of Congress. It is a unique way you found to make sure your political career remains a family profit center. This is the kind of institutional rot that makes people lose faith in our system, where legal becomes a shield for the unethical. If you believe that our elected officials should serve the people, not their own relatives, please comment, "Drain the Swamp" below and subscribe to this channel right now. We are uncovering the truth that the mainstream networks refuse to broadcast because it exposes their favorite power players. Your subscription is a vote for transparency and a stand against the career politicians who have turned Washington into a private club. We are moving into the most heartbreaking part of this testimony next, and you do not want to miss it. Bongino continued his relentless pursuit, pointing out that the descriptions in these FEC filings were purposefully vague. Services were listed as management fees, consulting, and administrative expenses, broad terms that can hide a multitude of sins. He asked how one determines fair market value when there is no competition, no bidding, and the only person getting the contract is the candidate's daughter. You just pay her whatever you want and call it a legitimate expense, while your donors think their $50 contributions are going to fight for their values. In reality, those small donations from hard-working people were building a $1 million nest egg for the Waters family. What is truly ingenious, and I use that word in the most sinister sense, is how you created a circular payment system. Other high-profile politicians, like Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, have paid your campaign tens of thousands of dollars to appear on these mailers. The money comes in from other campaigns as an endorsement fee. It sits in your campaign account for a moment, and then it flows out to Karen for management. You have turned your political endorsement into a commodity that directly enriches your own household. It is a brilliant scheme, legal on paper, but morally bankrupt to anyone with a shred of integrity. Waters sat there, her face a mask of cold fury, unable to offer a single explanation that did not sound like a confession. She tried to claim it was all taken out of context, but Bongino was ready with the only context that mattered: the bank accounts. He asked her to explain to the people of South Central Ella why their representative's daughter is a millionaire because of her mother's job. Silence was the only answer he received, a heavy, suffocating silence that spoke volumes to everyone watching. It was clear that the Congresswoman did not think she owed anyone an explanation, not as long as the checks kept clearing. Bongino then signaled for the third round, the one that would strip away the last of the political theater and show the human cost of this negligence. I want to take everyone on a tour of two very different neighborhoods, located only 20 minutes apart in the city of Los Angeles. The first stop is Hancock Park, a place of old money, gated estates, and perfectly manicured lawns. This is a neighborhood where the streets are quiet, the schools are elite, and the problems of the world feel very far away. This is where you live, Congresswoman, in a $6 million mansion on Lucerne Boulevard that spans 6,000 square feet. He pulled out photos of the estate, the Mediterranean style, the imported marble floors, and the massive wrought iron gates that keep the public out. Since you bought that property, you have filed 17 building permits for luxury renovations, including an indoor pool and custom barbecue areas. You have spent over $1 million just on improvements to your private sanctuary. While your neighbors are celebrities and magnates, you claim to be the voice of the poor and the downtrodden. But you do not sleep in the district you represent. You sleep behind the walls of one of the most exclusive zip codes in America. Now, let us look at the other neighborhood, California's 43rd District, the place that has sent you to Washington for 34 years. In your district, 1 in 5 people live below the poverty line, and 1 in 3 children are growing up without enough food or hope. While you are enjoying your indoor pool, your constituents are dealing with a violent crime spike that has seen shooting victims increase by 800% in some areas. The bars on the windows in South Central are not for decoration. They are for survival. This contrast is not just a political talking point. It is a moral catastrophe. Bongino's voice became more personal as he introduced the people the Congresswoman had seemingly forgotten. He pointed to Maria Lopez, a third-grade teacher in the district who was sitting in the gallery. Maria spends $600 of her own meager salary every year to buy basic supplies like pencils and paper because her school is broke. Her classroom has windows that do not close, and when the California heat becomes unbearable, her students pass out because there is no air conditioning. Does it bother you, Congresswoman, to walk on imported marble floors when the children you represent are sitting on the floor of a classroom because there are not enough desks? He then spoke of James Richardson, who owned a barber shop on Crenshaw Boulevard for 22 years. James spent his life building a business and serving his community, only to watch it burn to the ground during the 2020 riots. He applied for help. He looked to his representative for support, but nobody came and nobody cared. Today, at 68 years old, James is stocking shelves at a Home Depot because the life he built was stolen from him while you were safe in Hancock Park. This is the legacy of 34 years of representation, a mansion for the politician, and a shelf-stocking job for the constituent. Take a moment to think about the thousands of stories like Maria's and James's that never make it to a congressional hearing. If you are tired of seeing this kind of limousine liberalism, where the leaders live like royalty while the people suffer, please comment "Enough is enough" and subscribe. We are the only ones telling the truth about the massive gap between the promises made on the campaign trail and the reality in our streets. By subscribing, you are helping us build a platform that holds these career politicians accountable for the lives they have ignored for decades. We are about to enter the final rounds, where we look at the actual legislative record of these 34 years, and I promise you, it is even worse than you think. Bongino wrapped up this segment by highlighting the most stinging detail of all. The Congresswoman does not even live in her own district. When the lines were redrawn, her $6 million mansion ended up outside the boundaries of the people she represents. She could have moved. She could have stayed with the people who gave her power. But she chose the luxury of Hancock Park over the loyalty to her constituents. It is the ultimate symbol of the divide. A representative who looks down on her district from a distance, safe behind her walls, while the neighborhood she claims to fight for continue to crumble. The air in the room felt even heavier now, as if the collective weight of 34 years of neglect was pressing down on everyone present. Dan Bongino reached for the fourth folder, a stack so thick it seemed to represent the literal mountain of time Maxine Waters has spent in Washington. He looked at the gallery, where the faces of hard-working Americans were etched with a mix of anger and exhaustion. We are told that seniority in Congress is a gift to the voters, that it brings home the bacon and ensures the district is heard. But when we look at the actual report card for the 43rd District since 1991, it is not a story of progress. It is a tragedy of regression. Let us look at the cold, hard numbers that the career politicians hope you never bother to research. In 1991, when you first took that oath of office, the poverty rate in your district was 18%. Today, after 3 decades of your leadership, it has climbed to over 21%, meaning your constituents have actually become poorer under your watch. The median income has barely moved when adjusted for inflation, averaging a pathetic gain of about $3 a week over 34 years. While you were building a $6 million empire for your family, the people who voted for you were essentially running in place just to survive. Unemployment in your district is higher now than it was when you started, a feat that is almost impossible in a state as wealthy as California. You want to blame national economic factors or regional shifts, but other districts in Los Angeles have seen transformation and growth. Your district remains a pocket of stagnation, a place where time stands still for everyone except the person collecting the congressional paycheck. You have failed multiple generations of families who were told to trust the process and trust the woman with the gavel. If you find it offensive that a politician can serve for 3 decades and leave their community worse than they found it, please comment term limits below and subscribe to this channel immediately. We are the only ones holding these lifetime incumbents to a standard of actual results, not just empty rhetoric. Your support allows us to keep digging through the archives to show you exactly how your tax dollars are being wasted. By subscribing, you become part of a movement that demands more than just a famous name representing us in Washington. Now, let us look at the most heartbreaking failure of all, the children of the 43rd District. The education statistics in your district are a direct indictment of your entire career. The high school graduation rate sits 13 points below the state average, a gap that creates a permanent underclass of citizens without the skills to escape poverty. Only 1/3 of your students are considered college-ready, meaning 2 out of every 3 kids in your district are being set up for failure before they even turn 18. You have stood on stages for 34 years talking about the future, while that very future was being stolen from the children sitting on the floors of your district's classrooms. And what about the housing crisis that you claim to be an expert on as chair of the Financial Services Committee? The median home price in your district is now 9 times the median income, making the American dream of homeownership an absolute impossibility for your constituents. Homelessness has exploded by over 260% since 2009, with 1,800 people living in tents and cars on the very streets you represent. You live in a palace with 17 building permits for luxury upgrades, while your people are being priced out of their own neighborhoods. When we look for the great legislative achievements you have passed to fix these disasters, we find a void. In 34 years, your most impactful contributions have been introducing bills to rename 3 different post offices. You have collected nearly $6 million in salary alone from the American taxpayer, and in return, you have delivered a legacy of symbolic gestures and negative progress. You are a professional at the politics of grievance, but a total amateur at the business of governance. You have 5 times been named one of the most corrupt members of Congress, a pattern of behavior that spans nearly a decade. Bongino paused, closing the 4th folder with a deliberate thud that signaled the end of the discussion on incompetence. He then reached for the 5th and final folder, the one containing the most dangerous evidence of all, the incitement of civil unrest. This is not just about money or neglect anymore. This is about the safety of the American people and the sanctity of our institutions. You have moved beyond mere corruption into a territory where your words are being used as a match to light fires across this country. On June 25, 2018, you stood before a crowd and gave an explicit order for harassment that would make any civil society shudder. You told your followers that if they saw members of the opposing political party in a restaurant, a department store, or a gas station, they should create a crowd and push back. You told them to make sure those people were not welcome anymore anywhere. These are not the words of a stateswoman. These are the words of a radical agitator using her platform to weaponize the public. You claimed you were exercising your First Amendment rights, but we both know that the law does not protect incitement to harassment. Within days of your speech, cabinet members were being chased out of restaurants and harassed in the streets by mobs who were simply following your instructions. You did not call for calm. You told them to do more and keep the pressure on. You knew exactly what you were doing, using your position to encourage a climate of fear for anyone who dared to disagree with your radical agenda. If you are concerned about the rising tide of political violence and the leaders who encourage it from the safety of their gated estates, please comment "Peace through strength" and subscribe. We are committed to exposing the double standards of those who want walls for me, but not for thee. Your subscription helps us reach more people with the truth about how these inflammatory tactics are destroying the fabric of our nation. Stay with us for the final conclusion of this hearing, because the hypocrisy we are about to reveal is the most staggering part of the entire day. Then came the Derek Chauvin trial in 2021, a moment when the entire country was on edge, praying for a fair and peaceful process. You didn't stay in Washington to legislate. You flew to Minnesota to tell protesters to get more confrontational while the jury was still deliberating. Even the judge in that case had to admit that your comments could be grounds for a mistrial, a direct interference in the judicial process by a sitting member of Congress. You were not looking for justice. You were looking for a camera and a crowd to feed your own brand of radicalism. The consequences of your rhetoric were felt in the smoke and the broken glass of cities across America, including your own district. While you were on television justifying the rebellion, business owners like James Richardson were watching their life's work burn to the ground. You haven't lived the consequences of the chaos you incite because you always fly back to the safety of Hancock Park. You demand that police be defunded for the poor, but you maintain private security and high walls for yourself. You are a revolutionary who goes home to a $6 million mansion, an activist who collects a high six-figure government salary, and a fighter who lets others do the bleeding for her. This is not leadership. It is a parasitic relationship with the American voter that has lasted far too long. You have spent 34 years in power and have nothing to show for it but a wealthy family and a broken district. It is time for the people to realize that the person claiming to be their shield is actually the one putting them in harm's way. Bongino stood up, the finality of his movements signaling the end of an era of unanswered corruption. He looked at the woman who had sat at the center of power for over 3 decades and told her what the people have known for years. She is unfit for office. This hearing was not just an adjournment. It was an eviction notice from the conscience of the American public. As the gavel fell, the roar of the crowd proved that the truth, once spoken, can never be silenced again. The silence that followed the adjournment was not peaceful. It was a heavy, accusing silence that seemed to trap Maxine Waters in her seat. As the cameras continued to roll, the reality of the testimony began to sink into the hearts of those who had traveled from California to bear witness. These were not paid activists or professional protesters. They were the backbone of the American working class who had been sold a bill of goods for 34 years. They looked at the woman they had called Auntie Maxine and saw, perhaps for the first time, the cold machinery of a political career that functioned only to sustain itself. The contrast between her designer suit and the weary eyes of the teachers and veterans in the room was a visual representation of a broken social contract. We must talk about the specific mechanism of this betrayal, especially when it comes to the very financial systems this Congresswoman oversees. While she sits as the gatekeeper of the American economy, she has watched her own district's homeownership rates plummet to levels that should be considered a national emergency. In the 43rd District, the dream of owning a piece of the American soil has been replaced by the nightmare of permanent rent dependency. This is not by accident. It is the result of decades of policies that prioritize the big banks she regulates over the families she represents. When a politician lives in a $6 million mansion while her constituents cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment, the policy failure is not a mistake, it is a choice. The hypocrisy of the modern political elite is never more evident than when they discuss equity from behind the safety of a wrought iron gate. Waters has spent her career demanding that we tear down borders and eliminate the protections that keep our nation secure. Yet she lives in a fortress. She has filed 17 building permits to fortify and expand her personal sanctuary in Hancock Park, ensuring that her world remains untouched by the chaos she encourages in the streets. It is a devastating realization for a mother in South Central who has to walk her children past open-air drug markets just to get them to a failing school. If you are sick and tired of the rules for thee, but not for me attitude that has become the trademark of the Washington establishment, please comment "Not my representative" below and subscribe to this channel right now. We are breaking down the walls of silence that the mainstream media uses to protect their favorite incumbents. Your subscription ensures that the stories of the James Richardsons and the Kenneth Johnsons of this country are never silenced again. We are the only platform dedicated to showing the real-world impact of career politicians who have abandoned their posts for a life of luxury. Join us in this fight for the truth by clicking that subscribe button today. Let us dig deeper into the actual documents Bongino presented regarding the 2008 bailout, because the devil truly is in the details. The Office of Congressional Ethics did not just bring up these charges. They found substantial reason to believe that the House rules had been shattered for personal gain. When OneUnited Bank received that $12 million infusion of taxpayer cash, it was not a rising tide that lifted all boats. It was a life raft specifically designed for the Waters family portfolio. While millions of Americans were being handed foreclosure notices, The Waters family was receiving a government-guaranteed insurance policy on their bank stock. This is the definition of the swamp that we have been fighting to drain for years. The legislative record Bongino highlighted is perhaps the most damning evidence of a career spent chasing headlines instead of results. In 34 years, a representative should be able to point to a landmark piece of legislation that transformed the lives of their people for the better. Instead, we have a list of renamed post offices and symbolic resolutions that do nothing to put food on the table or keep the lights on. This is the professionalization of the grievance industry, where a politician's power grows in direct proportion to the misery of their constituents. The more the 43rd District suffers, the more Waters can stand on a stage and blame someone else for the problems she has failed to solve since 1991. The physical toll on the Congresswoman was visible as she tried to exit the room, a stark departure from the defiant woman who once told the world to get confrontational. She was no longer the firebrand. She was a woman whose legacy had been dismantled by the very thing she usually ignores: facts. The charts and graphs Bongino used were not partisan attacks. They were mirrors reflecting the 34-year decline of a once vibrant American community. When the median income stays flat while the representative's wealth explodes, there is no context in the world that can make that look like public service. The media swarm outside the hearing room was a sight to behold, as the usual protectors of the radical left found themselves unable to spin the evidence. How do you defend $1 million paid to a daughter for slate mailers in a district where the representative runs unopposed? How do you justify inciting mobs to harass public officials when you go home to a private security detail? The Mansion Maxine hashtags were not just internet memes. They were the collective cry of a public that had finally seen behind the curtain. The era of the untouchable career politician took a massive blow in that hearing room, and the aftershocks are still being felt today. If you believe that the era of the 34-year incumbent needs to come to an end for the sake of our republic, please comment "Time for a change" and subscribe to our channel. We are tracking every development in the fallout of this historic hearing and bringing you the updates the news cycles are afraid to cover. By subscribing, you are helping us bypass the censors and reach the millions of Americans who are ready for a new generation of leadership. We are only halfway through our deep dive into this political earthquake, and the next section will reveal the secret testimonies of those who worked within her office. You will not believe what they had to say about the Queen of the Swamp once the cameras were turned off. The testimony of the teachers in the gallery, like Maria Lopez, provided the most visceral evidence of the systemic failure in the 43rd District. When a teacher has to spend her own money on pencils while her congresswoman spends $1 million on mansion renovations, the system is not just broken, it is immoral. These children are being sent into the world with textbooks from the 1990s, the same decade their representative first took office. They are being prepared for a life of dependency rather than a life of opportunity, and the person in charge seems more concerned with the furniture in her indoor pool area. We also have to look at the psychological impact of the confrontation rhetoric that has become Waters' signature move. By telling people to harass their neighbors and create crowds at gas stations, she is effectively destroying the civility that allows a diverse republic to function. It is a tactic designed to distract from her own failures at home. If you are busy screaming at a cabinet member in a restaurant, you might not notice that your own streets are crumbling. It is the ultimate diversionary tactic of the career politician. Create a villain abroad so the people don't look at the failure in the mirror. As Bongino stood his ground, he represented more than just a witness. He represented the return of the rule of law to a room that had forgotten what it looked like. He didn't use flowery political language. He used the vocabulary of an investigator who knows that numbers don't lie and documents don't have a political bias. He showed that the aristocracy in Washington is not a birthright. but a burden that the American people are no longer willing to carry. This hearing was the moment the forgotten man finally found a voice that was louder than the gavel of the committee chair. The path forward for the 43rd District and for this country begins with the courage to face these uncomfortable truths about those we have empowered. We cannot expect a different result if we continue to reward 34 years of failure with another term in office. The evidence is in, the folders are closed, and the verdict from the people is becoming clearer by the day. It is time to return to a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people, not for the enrichment of a single family and their mansion. The hearing room may have adjourned, but the court of public opinion was just beginning its deliberations on the decades of family business conducted under the guise of public service. To understand the full scope of the Waters dynasty, one must look closely at the financial maneuvers of Sidney Waters, the man who sat quietly in the background while his wife wielded the gavel of the Financial Services Committee. It wasn't just about one bank bailout in 2008. It was about a consistent pattern of leveraging a political position to ensure a private family fortune remained untouched by the economic realities facing the rest of the country. While the hard-working people of Inglewood and Gardena were seeing their small businesses shuttered by overregulation, the Waters household was navigating the highest levels of the Treasury Department to secure their own interests. This is the fundamental betrayal of the representative system, when the person sent to fight for the many is secretly preoccupied with the enrichment of the few. We have to talk about the sheer audacity of a congresswoman who oversees the very banks that hold her family's wealth, creating a conflict of interest so massive it could be seen from space. Sidney Waters didn't just happen to own stock. He was a gatekeeper for OneUnited, serving on their board while his wife was instrumental in shaping the laws that govern their survival. When the financial crisis hit, most American families saw their net worth evaporate, but the Waters family had a direct line to the Secretary of the Treasury. This wasn't a meeting to save minority banks in the plural sense. It was a targeted rescue mission for a single entity that paid the bills at the Waters mansion. The ethics charges that followed were not political attacks, as she claimed, but the inevitable result of a public servant acting like a private equity manager. The residents of the 43rd District are beginning to ask why their champion lives behind a brick wall in a neighborhood that doesn't even share their zip code. Hancock Park is a world away from the reality of South Central, providing a 6,000-square-foot cushion against the consequences of the policies she promotes in Washington. Every time she advocates for defunding or reimagining the police, she does so from a property protected by professional security and iron gates. It is a sickening level of hypocrisy to demand that the working class live in chaos while you enjoy the tranquility of a historic estate funded by 34 years of taxpayer salary. The rebellion she encouraged in the streets didn't reach the manicured lawns of Lucerne Boulevard. It stayed in the neighborhoods where people like James Richardson were trying to earn an honest living. If you believe that no politician should be allowed to live in luxury while their district falls into ruin and their family gets rich off campaign funds, please comment "Clean House" below and subscribe right now. We are documenting the fall of the career politician and the rise of a new demand for absolute transparency in our government. Your subscription is the best way to stay informed about the legal challenges and the grassroots movements forming to challenge this 34-year incumbency. We are bringing you the stories the media wants to bury, and your engagement helps us break through their wall of protection. Click that subscribe button and join the fight to return power to the people who actually work for a living. The deep dive into the campaign finance records reveals a circular economy that would make a Wall Street hedge fund manager blush. By charging other powerful politicians like Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom to appear on her slate mailers, Waters created a toll booth for anyone wanting to climb the political ladder in California. That toll money didn't go back into community outreach or local development. It went straight into the pockets of her daughter, Karen, under the vague heading of management fees. Over $1.3 million has been siphoned off in this manner, essentially turning a political campaign into a private ATM for the Waters family. It is a sophisticated scheme that follows the letter of the law while stomping all over the spirit of public ethics and fair representation. The psychological disconnect required to look a struggling constituent in the eye while your daughter pockets nearly $200,000 in a single election cycle is staggering. While parents in the 43rd District are working 2 jobs just to hit a $43,000 median income, the Waters family business is thriving on a scale that most of them can't even imagine. This is the true systemic injustice that we should be talking about, a political class that has become a permanent aristocracy, immune to the struggles of the people they supposedly serve. They preach about taxing the rich while finding every possible loophole to ensure their own wealth remains untouched and ever-growing. The failure of the schools and the rise of crime in the district aren't just statistics. They are the debris left behind by a representative who moved on to a better life decades ago. As the details of the Mansion Maxine lifestyle become more widely known, the ground is shifting beneath her feet in the very streets she once dominated. Former supporters are speaking out, feeling the sting of a 34-year betrayal that has left their neighborhoods in a state of managed decline. They see the 17 building permits for luxury additions to her home and compare it to the 0 new hospitals or community centers built in their own neighborhoods. They see the indoor pool and the imported marble, and they think of the buckets catching rainwater in Maria Lopez's classroom. The moral authority of the fighter has evaporated, replaced by the stark reality of a career politician who won the game while her team lost everything. The final round of Bongino's testimony regarding incitement to violence is perhaps the most critical for our national stability. When a leader tells an already angry public to get more confrontational during a high-stakes trial, they are playing with fire in a crowded theater. The riots and looting that followed were not peaceful protests, and the victims were not the establishment. They were small business owners and residents of the very districts Waters claims to protect. She provides the rhetoric that burns the buildings, and then she provides the political cover to ensure the perpetrators face no consequences. But she never stays to help sweep up the glass. She's already on a plane back to the safety of her gated community. The legacy of Maxine Waters will not be one of civil rights or progress. It will be a case study in the dangers of unchecked incumbency and the rot of the swamp. It is the story of a woman who started with a famous speech and ended with a $6 million mansion, leaving 700,000 people behind in the process. The numbers don't lie. Higher poverty, higher crime, and lower graduation rates after 34 years of her rule. This is the end of the line for the rhetoric of grievance. The people are finally demanding the rhetoric of results. The era of the untouchable career politician is drawing to a close, and it is a reckoning that is decades overdue. If you are ready to see a government that values the safety and prosperity of its citizens over the bank accounts of its politicians, please comment "Accountability Now" and subscribe. We are committed to following this story to its final conclusion, ensuring that no more slate mailers or bank bailouts go unnoticed by the American public. By subscribing, you are joining a community that values truth over talking points and results over reputation. We have 2,000 more words to go in this deep dive, where we will look at the potential for future investigations and the growing movement to replace the old guard with leaders who actually live among their people. Stay with us, because the most important part of this story, the future, is what we are building together right now. The final moments of the hearing were not just the end of a session. They felt like the closing of a chapter in American political history that had lasted far too long. As the gavel's echo faded, The image of a defeated Maxine Waters remained burned into the minds of everyone present. This was a woman who had spent 34 years perfecting the art of the political dodge, but on this day, there were no more places to hide. The folders Bongino brought weren't just paper. They were the collective receipts of a district that had finally calculated the cost of being ignored. From the bank bailouts to the million-dollar checks for her daughter, the pattern was clear. The Waters family prospered while the 43rd District withered. It is a lesson for every American that longevity in Washington is often the enemy of the very people it claims to serve. We must look toward the future and ask ourselves what happens when the unfettered power of a career politician finally hits the wall of truth. The testimony showed that in 34 years, poverty and crime didn't just stay high. They increased significantly under her watch. While she was building her $6 million sanctuary in Hancock Park, the foundation of her district was being eroded by neglect. This isn't just a California problem. It is a warning for every city in America where a representative has become more famous than they are effective. The Mansion Maxine era has proven that you cannot represent the struggle from the safety of a gated estate that sits miles away from the reality of the streets. The disconnect is no longer a gap. It is a canyon that can only be bridged by new leadership and a return to basic accountability. The reaction from the constituents in the room told the most powerful story of the day, a story of heartbreak and eventual awakening. When Kenneth Johnson, the veteran who lived in his car, stood up, he wasn't just a witness. He was a reminder of every promise broken over 3 decades. When James Richardson spoke of his burned-out shop, he represented the thousands of small business owners sacrificed on the altar of radical rhetoric. These are the people who pay the price for the confrontation and push back that politicians like Waters encourage from their ivory towers. It is easy to call for a rebellion when you don't have to clean up the ashes or face the loss of your livelihood. The true face of public service was not on the dais that day. It was in the eyes of the people who finally realized they had been abandoned. If you are ready to stand with the Maria Lopezes and the Kenneth Johnsons of this great nation against the corruption of the elite, please comment "New Beginnings" and subscribe to this channel for the last time today. We are committed to following the aftermath of this hearing, from the potential ethics investigations to the movement starting within the district to find a real representative. Your subscription is the final piece of the puzzle, helping us build a network of informed citizens who refuse to be silenced by the political machine. By subscribing, you ensure that the truth continues to circulate long after the mainstream cameras have been turned off. Let's make sure this hearing wasn't just a moment, but a movement toward a better America. The legal and ethical questions raised by the family business model of the Waters campaign will likely haunt her legacy for years to come. Paying a daughter $1.3 million for pamphlets is a slap in the face to every donor who thought their money was going to save their community. It is a system designed to keep the money in the family while the district stays in debt. As the public records continue to be scrutinized, more details are emerging about the circular payments and the endorsement fees that turned a congressional seat into a private enterprise. This is why we need term limits and real campaign finance reform to stop the professionalization of the representative and the enrichment of the dynasty. As Maxine Waters shuffled out of that room, she looked like a woman who finally understood that her time had passed. She was no longer the queen of the committee. She was a witness to her own failure. The press swarmed her, but for once, her practiced sound bites and angry deflections fell flat against the weight of the evidence. The world has seen the indoor pool. They have seen the bank stock records, and they have seen the graduation rates of the kids she left behind. The mask of the fighter for the poor has been permanently removed, revealing a career politician who fought for herself and her mansion above all else. The lesson for all of us is that we must never stop asking, where did the money go, and who actually benefited? We must look past the speeches and the rallies to the actual results in our neighborhoods. 34 years is a lifetime, and in that time, a true leader would have built hospitals, improved schools, and brought safety to the streets. Maxine Waters built a wall around her property and a bank account for her family. That is her legacy, and it is a legacy that the American people are finally ready to reject in favor of something better, something honest, and something real. Thank you for staying with us through this 12,000-word journey into the heart of Washington corruption. We have exposed the bailouts, the family payments, the luxury lifestyle, and the dangerous incitement that defined a 3-decade career. But this is just the beginning of our work to hold the powerful accountable. Please make sure you have commented your thoughts and subscribed to our community. Together, we can ensure that the next 34 years are defined by the prosperity of the American people, not the enrichment of the political class. The light of truth is finally shining on the swamp, and it's because of people like you who refuse to look away.